our situation today in the world when it comes to security and a political situation?
Well, needless to say, there are numerous challenges in the world. A lot of people describe the situation right now as one of the most complex that they have seen in recent decades. You have everything from Islamic extremism to a resurgent Russia, challenges, conflicts in the South China Sea, cyber terrorism and theft. Again, very significant challenges. And those are leading to other challenges, of course, because you have the issue in Europe with the refugee flow from Syria that's a result of the ongoing civil war there. You have problems in North Africa that are also leading to refugee issues. So again, it's a very, very challenging time geopolitically throughout the world, and you see that obviously in Europe as well.
You have just mentioned the terrorism as one of the biggest threats, and it takes almost a leading place in the world problems. You had the chance to fight face to face with that menace. How we could fight against the terrorism today, especially as against the so-called homegrown terrorism?
Well, I think the key to combating homegrown terrorism is intelligence, intelligence, and intelligence, obviously with domestic law enforcement together with intelligence agencies. But beyond that, there have to be other programs. You always have to have a comprehensive approach. So there has to be an information operation approach, if you will, public affairs, campaigns to ensure that the voices of extremism are countered in cyberspace, in social media, in society at large, that students in a sense are inoculated against this, that they understand what extremism can lead to over time and the challenges that it can bring.
You have said we have seen a lot of terrorist attacks in Europe, especially at the end of the last year. In one of your interviews, you have said that the Brexit would make a tougher situation for a fight against terrorism. Is Europe enough strong to fight against the terrorism today with the actions which have been taken since the Paris attacks?
Well, there needs to be more of what has begun in the wake of the Paris attacks. That's not to say there were not already bodies that were integrating intelligence the way it is so necessary and information. Again, a mix of domestic law enforcement and the intelligence agencies. But clearly that needs to be strengthened. It needs to continue to grow. The fact is that in some countries there are still within countries. There are different police forces for just one city, and even they don't necessarily share the way they need to. So this really comes down again to sharing information and more importantly to sharing analysis of all that information once it's been fused together. So you take the product of every form of intelligence that you can get, from human to imagery to cyber to signals. That all has to be brought together with very skilled analysts, and then the results of that shared with all of the so-called stakeholders who are engaged in trying to keep our societies safe from these extremists.
Your successor at the CIA, John Brennan, recently has visited Bosnia and Herzegovina. Many have asked why he had come here. In your experience, when director of CIA comes to a small country as Bosnia, does that mean that he wants to help us, or that we have bigger problems that we can resolve and we need a bigger help from countries as the United States?
I think it sends a couple of messages. I think first it does indeed indicate a desire to help. It also indicates, frankly, a desire to strengthen relationships that have been long-standing here. I served here, of course, for a year from 2001 to 2002. I was engaged in a variety of different activities here that did indeed integrate with law enforcement and intelligence agencies, not just from my own country and other coalition countries, but with the host nation here as well. I visited a number of European and Eastern European countries when I was the director of the CIA. It wasn't because they had some big threat always. It was rather that we had a good partnership and we wanted to continue to strengthen and to build on that partnership.
We know that some 300 people from Bosnia and Herzegovina have went and fought on the side of so-called Islamic State. You have said once that the Islamic State is not a terrorist organization, but a well-equipped army.
Well, the Islamic State that has attacked in Syria and Iraq is really more of an army than it is just a terrorist organization. That doesn't mean that it does not have terrorist cells also in Iraq. You see attacks, for example, in Baghdad, in the capital, in other locations in Iraq. You see those in Syria, and you see terrorist activity either inspired by or enabled to some degree by the Islamic State, and perhaps you might call them graduates of their fighting in Syria, returning to their home countries with much greater expertise in explosives, in tactics, weaponry, and so forth.
Is there a way to win in this war against so-called Islamic State?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have no doubt that the Islamic State will be defeated in Iraq and over time, I think, in Syria as well. And I think there's a degree of momentum actually gathering on those battlefields in particular, even as we are beginning to do more, for example, in Libya and in some other areas where you see the Islamic State trying to put down roots. The fact is, though, that what we've got to remember in Iraq and Syria is that the real issue is one of politics. And Baghdad politics, if they are inclusive, if they can bring the Sunni Arabs back into the fabric of society, as we did successfully during the surge in Iraq, the results of which were sustained for 3.5 years after we left, or ended the surge, and only collapsed when highly sectarian policies were pursued by the Iraqi government after our last commander left.
We just mentioned Syria and Islamic State. We have a migrant crisis currently in Europe, and there is quite a bit of problems with that. And Europe is trying to handle it on some different ways. But is there any way to stop that crisis? And should we look more outside of Europe for a solution, maybe in a cooperation between North America and Europe to solve this issue of a migrant crisis?
Well, in truth, the real solution to the migrant crisis is the location from which the migrants are coming. And that is obviously Syria, in some cases it's Iraq, to some degree it's Afghanistan, it's Northern Africa. And so we've got to go to the root causes in those locations, obviously, for the ultimate solution. Now, there's a good temporary solution, I think, involving support for Turkey, and Turkey will both take these refugees back so that they're closer to their homes. You know, the refugees want to go home ultimately. Many of them waited for years before they finally left their country after just losing all hope. So the closer you can keep them to their former homes, the better off you are in general. And that will help certainly with respect to Syria, but now there are the problems coming out of North Africa and into, say, Italy as well, and those have to be addressed also.
Let's move to the Bosnia and Herzegovina. You
Sure.
know Bosnia and Herzegovina well since 1990s. What is your view of the situation in Bosnia today?
Well, first of all, I think that the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina should take great pride in what has taken place since the end of the Civil War. As you noted, I've been in here since the mid to late 1990s. I even spent a year here from 2001 to 2002. I've come back many times since. I've noted that I felt privileged to serve here as a soldier when Bosnia needed soldiers, and I feel privileged to be back now as an investor when Bosnia and Herzegovina needs investors. And indeed, the firm in which I'm a partner, KKR, has invested $1.5 billion in telecommunications across the former Yugoslavia in the Balkans, with probably $150 or so million of that being right here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We would not have done that if we didn't believe that we were going to be able to invest that successfully. In other words, to get a return on our investment. And indeed, the firm here, Telemark, has moved forward. There are 14 small acquisitions, gradually bringing them together and seeing progress made. Having said that, clearly there needs to be additional action taken to provide the consistency and the transparency that are such key qualities to giving the confidence to investors like KKR to do more. And that's what we're watching. And this is where the path to the EU, also the path to NATO, this matters a great deal. The road to the EU will require the kinds of reforms, the kinds of transparency, the kinds of consistency that are critical to attracting other investors here. And that's why we're heartened to see that, even as we are indeed grappling with certain issues to ensure that this investment succeeds.
Which of those two organizations are much more important for us, EU or NATO?
Well, I wouldn't choose between the two. I think they both bring positive features. The integration, again, in either of those is hugely important. One obviously in the security arena, the other more in the economic and political, but even in security as well when it comes to law enforcement and so forth. So I think these are legitimate goals, very, very good goals for this country. As I mentioned, we're heartened to see the steps, the early steps being taken on the road to the EU and the road to NATO, and we want to see further steps. We want to confirm the excellence of Bosnia and Herzegovina and its leaders in proceeding down that road in a steady and deliberate manner.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.